Let's get up.
Lucas Richards has been acquitted by criminal code B.
Let's go. God will punish you. You will die. Your eyes will be open. For what you get to me and the shit you caused my family and I, you will suffer. I guess you. You will suffer. You will die. Your generation. Your generation. For that the consequence of what you did. You will suffer, Lucas. You will suffer. In any church and lawyers, in any church and lawyers, I got you. I swear, the children will suffer this thing. The children will bear the consequences of what you did.
That was Jessica Lloyd.
Welcome back, guys. I trust you've been staying safe. Now, this case is very interesting. This is an update to the Lucas Richards and Jessica Lloyd case. If you are not privy to the story, you can just go back to my playlist. But basically, Lucas Lloyd is an American missionary, and he was standing trial for trying to unalive Jessica Lloyd, a Liberian citizen, after he had gotten her pregnant, married her, although he had a wife, and a whole lot of things. I'll get into it. And he was arrested, and now he has been put on trial, and guess what? He has been found not guilty. And the verdict of that trial is creating so much public dissatisfaction and disaffection in Liberia, because most people just can't understand how Lucas Richards, an American citizen, per all that was gathered against him as evidence, testimonies, and others from people who saw him in broad daylight, allegedly trying to unalive his now wife, Jessica Lloyd, and apprehended him and submitted him to the police. Despite all this, he has some way somehow been found not guilty. And some news outlets have it that the grounds for that verdict was that there was not enough evidence. So I'm going to sit on the fence and analyze this one, because I'm not here to chastise the court for the decision. I'm not privy to the facts they were privy to. I'm just speaking to what I saw happening on social media and various news outlets. But when it comes to trial cases, I know a little bit about it, enough to respect the fact that it has nothing to do with emotions. You may feel strongly somebody is guilty, but it does not necessarily make the person guilty. I think that is something we should all appreciate. That is not me trying to support Lucas Richards or support the court's decision. That is just me stating something that is an obvious fact. Now, Lucas Richards has been discharged, and some people are reporting that he might well be on his way to the United States of America. I'll come to that as well. I don't think it should be that easy for him, especially if Jessica Lloyd feels so hard done or feels like the system wasn't fair to her. Because just at the beginning of this video, you saw her outside of the court, on the court's premises, hurling curses at Lucas Richards after he was acquitted and discharged as not guilty for the charge leveled against him of an attempted murder against his now Liberian wife, Jessica Lloyd. So I guess it confirms that there's a thin line between love and hatred. I've always said this, and that is a fact. But I digress. Now, some people are not happy with the ruling of the courts. I respect their emotions, but this is what I'll say. If you go back to my previous videos and all the information out there on this issue, you would see that basically there were two conflicting stories. There was the story of the people, the Liberian citizens for that matter, who happened to be there at the time the alleged crime was being committed by Lucas Richards, where they are saying that they saw Lucas Richards use an object on Jessica Lloyd and then try to unalive her, at which point they rushed on him and also tried to prevent him from doing such. Now, after this, they are saying that they then apprehended him, and handed him over to the police. That story seems to be corroborated by the testimony of Jessica Lloyd when she was able to be resuscitated and she spoke. But then, Lucas Richard also had a different version, which still comes back to why the boys would have apprehended him or would have accosted him. He is saying that he was having a good time with Jessica Lloyd. They went to observe some things, and then these guys pounced on him and tried to rob him. So it conflicts, and this is the time that evidence will be required to situate the issue accurately for what it is and for what it isn't. And unfortunately, that is what determines the ruling of the court. Yeah, it's a fact. I heard this somewhere, and I don't know, but maybe I would subscribe to this on this particular issue. And the person said that sometimes in the court of law, it's not about what is the truth, but it's about what you can prove. Although people swear oath by the Bible, the Quran and all, some people can lie, and the evidence that they would bring might make their lies sometimes seem like it's true. That's how come sometimes there are wrong convictions, where the evidence might be overwhelmingly in support of what is not so true, and what is true might be suffering in getting evidence to support it. I don't know if you are following, but that is my layman's opinion though. And it's just to highlight the point that per how this case has played out, it's very unfortunate for those who strongly believe that Lucas Richards is guilty of what he's been accused of. That is the charge of attempted murder of Jessica Lloyd after he had gotten her pregnant and even gone ahead to marry her, although he is married in the US. And now it's just interesting. The country is having some of its citizens feeling that Jessica Lloyd lost the case because she's poor. I don't know about that. I've never been to Liberia. I don't know anything about its legal system. But I choose to believe that the legal system is sanctimonious and they do the right thing and they go by the operation of law, because obviously they are the legal system. And if that's the case, like I said, I respect the emotions of these people, but it might not be because Jessica is poor, that's how come she lost the case. It might be, as is alleged, the court stated as its reason for granting that no guilty verdict for Lucas Richards, which is that allegedly there was not enough evidence to find Lucas Richards guilty on. Look at the case for itself. Per all the things I've seen, I couldn't also find that there was enough evidence. It's going to be, you said, she said, they said, he said. But if there could have been maybe a CCTV footage, a video footage, something else that ties the story to a point where it becomes an irrefutable evidence in support of what Jessica Lloyd and the others who allegedly rescued her from Lucas Richards are saying, at that point, it would have situated it differently, most likely. But as it stood, it became something that might not be enough. And this is where it gets sad, because there's a strong possibility that Jessica Lloyd is telling the truth. If you look at the pain, the bitterness, the anger with which she is hurling out curses against Pastor Lucas Richards outside of the courtroom, I think that she could possibly be telling the truth, and that Lucas Richards may have just beat the system due to a lack of evidence. That is what my instincts tell me. I'm not saying that is what it actually is, but in such situations, the hand of the court is tied, because the court would also need to convict or would need to pass judgment based on the evidence. And if there was a jury, whatever, I don't know. But the evidence is key, and it doesn't seem like there was much in this case. Now, despite all the public outcry, the chaos and all, first of all, I think that the hurling of the cases by Jessica Lloyd against Lucas Richards openly like that is not the best. I think that there are people saying he's about to leave the country for the US, and it seems per my research that Liberia doesn't have an extradition treaty with the US. So for me, I think the best course of action is for Jessica Lloyd and her attorneys. I think that was the state prosecution. They should rather consider going for an appeal at the next level of the High Court so that they contest the decision of this court if they strongly feel that they still have a case. I think that is probably the best way to go, because all the outcry and all whatever it is doesn't change the current verdict of not guilty as it stands. There are some people who are also insinuating that maybe the US has flexed some muscles against Liberia. I don't subscribe to that. I don't think so. I don't think the US does all these things when it knows that the person is guilty of something. No, I don't think that is a possibility. I think that sometimes people use emotions to address issues where they should rather have been using facts to address. And like I explained earlier, I think this could actually be a valid verdict where lack of evidence was the root cause of the verdict. Because if the evidence isn't convincing enough, some of these things can come up sometimes. And you may not like it, but it is what it is. It's unfortunate. But then, this is Africa, and spirituality is something that is key here. I believe that is the reason why Jessica Lloyd resorted to the things that she was saying to Pastor Lucas Richards outside the church. That is the traditional form of justice in the spiritual realm, so to speak, where that one, the gods themselves would know the evidence, so they don't want you to give any evidence. They know. That is the African belief, that sometimes you can find justice in these ways. And it's very ironic that she was standing outside of a courthouse and she was now resorting to cursing to get spiritual justice. And I don't know if she's actually telling the truth. Then to an extent, someone would say you can't fault her, because sometimes it can be very, very painful when you know you are telling the truth, but nobody believes you, or you don't have any evidence to prove it. And the person who is lying seems to have gotten some evidence to support his lie, which then makes it seem like he or she is telling the truth, or your lack of evidence to back your truth just paves the way for the person to walk away freely. Because he who accuses obviously must prove. And the burden of proof is on Jessica Lloyd and the state prosecution. That is where it becomes a problem. And it looks like they were not able to successfully meet that burden of proof. My heart goes out to her and her family, but life goes on. And that is where the whole thing is, the karma. Because if it turns out that Jessica Lloyd is telling the truth and Pastor Lucas Richards is actually culpable for what he's been accused of, then there could still be karma catching up with him. I tell you, I believe that there could still be karma catching up with him. He may have beaten the Liberian legal system, but he can't beat karma. That is a fact. Unless, of course, he is innocent and they were just trying to set him up, and probably maybe for some. But the reason is why. Because if you look at the damage that was done to Jessica Lloyd, I don't think it looks like a setup. I think it looks more like something else. But hey, you and I were not there. The courts have spoken. Would they go on appeal? So far, so good. I haven't heard anything like that. And if Pastor Lucas Richard goes back to the US, what happens between himself and his wife? And in fact, what happens with the marriage he has with Jessica Lloyd? Because they got married. So he now has two wives. And one of the wives took him to court for attempted murder. He beat the case. She held cases at him. And what next? I think there's still some legal tussle left in the mill with regards to Jessica Lloyd apparently still being the wife of Pastor Lucas Richards. I'll still be following this case because I think there are other versions of it that are still hanging, yet to be fully brought to an end. But it's very unfortunate. That's the legal system for you. Sometimes what you strongly believe is not also what the legal system is able to establish and rule for. So let's see how it goes. Just keep an eye out. Stay safe out there. Subscribe if you haven't yet done so. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.